First of all, I want to thank the panelists, the participants who are here this evening for this very, very, very important hometown meeting. I want to introduce some of the participants. We're waiting on the arrival of Brenda Penn Williams, president of the NAACP. We have Mr. Greg Burnett here, who is the majority leader of the Common Council. We have Kadeem Roberts, who is the District A representative on the Common Council. We have Godfrey Azima, who is a member of the Board of Education. We have Reverend Wesley Clark, Richard Wesley Clark, who is the president of the International Denomination of Ministers, IMF. We have Reverend Lindsay Curtis, who will be joining us hopefully at a later time. We also expect Senator Chris Murphy will be joining us. He has another obligation, but probably will be joining us in the next half hour. I think I mentioned Chief Kaholwick. We also have Senator Bob Duff, who also has a previous commitment, who will be joining as well. My wife, Lucia Rilling, has joined us. So we expect to be here probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours. We want to make sure that we have this meeting for the purpose of which it is intended. But before I start, I would like to ask for a moment of silence for Mr. George Floyd. Let us not forget Ahmaud Arbery. Let us not forget Breonna Taylor, Eric Garner, and so on, and so on, and so on. May they rest in peace. Thank you. Well, welcome to tonight's town hall meeting on current events and building community relationships. As I said, we expect to be here an hour and a half to 2 hours, but we want to stay here as long as is necessary to make sure that we have the discussions that we need to have. After a period of time, we will be entertaining questions from the participants, the people who have signed on to watch this and who may want to have questions or statements or whatever they feel they need to say. You can click on the Q&A button on the bottom. I will have the questions. They will appear to me, and I will try to get through and answer as many as I possibly can. And I will pass questions on to other people who are on the panel here based on the content of the questions. First of all, I want to make just a brief statement. I want to say what this meeting, this town hall meeting, is not, and I want to say what it is. This is not a feel-good town hall meeting where we sit down, we have a discussion, we feel we've done our job, and we walk away and nothing else happens. I've been in law enforcement and as the mayor of the city of Norwalk for just under 48 years. I know that we've had many incidents during that time. We meet, we respond, we make commitments and promises, and then we walk away. And most of the time, if not all of the time, that's all we do. I'm here to say I'm just as guilty as everybody else. But I sense this is a different time right now. This is no longer going to be accepted, nor should it be. We should not be in a position where we just feel good by sitting down and having a conversation, making commitments, and do nothing else. I told you what this meeting is not, so let me tell you what this meeting is. This meeting is an opportunity for us to have the discussions we need to have, to let our feelings be known, to speak from the heart, to make any statement we feel we need to make, and to make a commitment that we vow to keep, that we will not have this business as usual. We will now move forward and commit to working as hard as we possibly can, bringing in all people from the community to work with us to start off by making Norwalk an equitable and justice city. And by being a catalyst, and by showing the rest of Connecticut and the rest of the United States what we can do, so they can follow our lead and we do the things that we need to do. One of the most powerful statements ever written by any government is found in the Declaration of Independence. We find these truths to be self-evident, that all men, all people are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among those being life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we cannot stop until those words, that statement by the founding fathers, becomes the paradigm, becomes the new way for our country. We have come up short again and again on that promise by our founding fathers. Let us commit ourselves to that statement, that goal, that promise. Nothing else can be acceptable. So having said that, I would like to offer the opportunity for Mr. Burnett, if you would start with a couple of your comments or thoughts, and then we'll go right down the line. And then after everybody's had an opportunity to speak, I will open it up to the questions from the people who are here watching us. Mr. Burnett.
Thank you, Mayor Rilling. Hopefully you can hear me. Good, thank you. And thank you to the city of Norwalk for those that have taken the time out of their busy evening to dial in and participate. That really means a lot. It's been some very trying times. The murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis was a pivotal event. It almost draws parallels to, I would say, Rosa Parks sitting down on the bus. And even though she wasn't the first woman to sit down on the bus, neither was Mr. Flood as the first Black man to die at the hands of a police officer choking him and removing life from his body. These events have motivated several people, in particular Black people, to act because basically we are tired and frustrated and fear for our lives and especially fear for the lives of our children. And the continuous promises of things getting better and issues being addressed to progress. And there are also those in America that even deny that there are injustices. So it is time that we address this situation. We currently have a pandemic called the COVID-19, but we also have a pandemic that is spreading the germ of racism, prejudice, and injustice across our country. And I truly believe now is a time to listen, to prioritize, to create actions, and most importantly, to educate all of America to remove this pandemic. And I think having this town hall, it starts with those that are on this call, our elected officials. It starts with dialogue with our police. It starts with our community leaders, all being held accountable for bringing about change. This will not happen overnight, but I believe with perseverance and cooperation, we can move towards making progress along this journey. And this is a start.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. Reverend Clark, would you care to say a few words?
Good evening, everyone. We have come at the time in the existence of humanity on earth, faced with challenges and dealing with the death of African Americans, and that African Americans, along with others, have to get on the street and march,
Did I lose my?
protest, to call for
Okay.
action. I believe that we can do a couple of things that will help us avoid this problem, or do our best to eradicate this systemic oppressive order in place that dehumanizes minority. And so I come, Honorable Mayor and members of this August gathering, to recommend a couple of things for consideration. The city has an agency that deals with discrimination in housing and employment, etc. Consideration perhaps could be given to a new community-based mayor-appointed commission or board composed of citizens and who report directly to the mayor's office. They could be empowered to have periodic community hearings and could listen to complaints from the public relevant to any of the city agencies or bodies responsible for the city's business or service. This type of proactive measure may sort out issues of concern before reaching a boiling point. Secondly, continue providing a platform for the youth to communicate with the police department. It could involve the youth in a constructive way to air their concerns before they get into trouble, and perhaps prevent them from getting into trouble. The parents and the faith-based members of the community could also perhaps participate as adult advisors to the group. However, the youth, exclusive of them, should have the space to talk openly with each other and the representative from the police department. Thirdly, the city of Norwalk is growing rapidly with all the new housing that is being developed. There are concerns that with the increased new costly structures, that it may impact the beautiful cultural diversity of the city that make Norwalk home to many minority groups. Our diversity is what strengthens the city and helps to make it special. If there is a safety net, or if there is not a safety net for those who cannot financially afford this growth, is it known or could it be more openly brought to the public attention? Such will help minimize the minority and others as well to live and focus on a positive life. And lastly, this has to do with the school. Review school curriculum, be inclusive, recognizing all nationality history, African American, Spanish, white, etc. Recognizing that we are more alike than we are different. Introduce forums in our schools that embrace other cultures. We act out because of fear, and we tend to hate or dislike what we fear. Honorable Mayor, this is my submission for consideration.
Thank you, Reverend Clark. You certainly raised a lot of issues that are that need to be on the table for discussion and need to be considered as we move forward. And I appreciate your bringing those forward at this time. And I'm sure that we will continue to have those discussions as we, as I said, as we move forward. So thank you again. I'm now going to pass it over to Mr. Kadeem Roberts, who is a District A representative on the Common Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I would first start off today with some statistics. That's a main thing. Between 1980 and 2019, Americans' incarcerated population grew from 500,000 to 2.3 million, which means about 60% of the incarceration rate of Americans are now, and still today, Black and Latino. So I always think about things, and since this situation, I thought about training police officers to be members of the community, not just armed patrolmen. Statistics show that new recruits spend about 60 hours learning how to handle a gun. It's very great and it's tactical, but guess how much time they spend learning how to de-escalate a situation or probably handle those that are mentally ill? Roughly only about 8 hours. The problem is police should be trained on how to develop better relationships with their communities. The training should incorporate culture, diversity, mental illness training, and youth development, bias and racism. So to open it up, I'm concerned. I'm concerned for the safety of the community, the African-American community, and the residents of all colors. But most importantly, Black people with police brutality. I am today speaking not only for the community of North Connecticut, but for African Americans in general worldwide. It hurts my soul to hear my mother worry every time I leave the house. So I'm saying today, in the start, and I'm loving that the whole community is on this as well. Coming from me, I will continue to use my voice as a weapon of resistance so that we can create a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. And I know when the chief has his comments, he may be able to talk about some of the training that officers do receive, as well as training that perhaps they need to have more of. He sits on the Police Officer Standards and Training Council. I did before him when I was the chief, and we developed training programs. So that's certainly an item that we need to have for discussion. Mr. Azima, would you care to make some opening remarks?
I truly appreciate the sentiments, that Reverend Richard Clark, spoke from, the position and sentiments captured by Greg, and also, the ideas with conviction presented by Kadeem. I think it's important, for us to be mindful of some of the immediate impacts of what has just happened. And when I look at the experience us going into COVID, the increased level of concern that people who are on the margins that now become further marginalized during catastrophic related events, that fear playing into the unknown, coupling that with the continuous images seen of injustice throughout the media. What this has really contributed to is really impacting people's feeling of voicelessness. And oftentimes what we see demonstrated by those who feel they have no voice are behaviors such as rioting and things that are not consistent with what we believe is effective means of communication. And when I put this in perspective for how our youth are just experiencing what we are going through together as a community, it's imperative for us to respond in a manner that allows people to be heard. I truly appreciate your intent and conviction, Mr. Mayor, around being ready to just not continue to talk about what we're going to do after this. The process for healing, if there wasn't an urgent time for us to act, it is now. And moving forward without really being able to just hear and completely, not empathize, the wrong word, completely hear the community is a very integral starting point. And I didn't want to repeat some of the ideas that I agree with that were said earlier, but I do want to emphasize and lead us into a further discussion around how we look about how we're going to heal this community from all the recent acts of injustice that took place before COVID, into COVID, during COVID, and that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Azuma. As many of you know, as I mentioned earlier, Godfrey is a member of the Board of Education, and as such has significant influence in our public school system. And he is a voice on the board that is respected and will be able to work with us to help the curriculum in the public schools to do the things that Reverend Clark was talking about and others, to have these kinds of discussions where we honor all people, where we ask people to understand that we are all alike and that we all want the same things in our life. And so I look forward to working with Godfrey and others in the future. I see we have just been joined by Brenda Penn-Williams, who is the president of the Norwalk NAACP. Before I go to the chief, I will ask Ms. Penn-Williams if she would like to make any comments at this time. And you're muted, so if you could unmute. There you go.
Okay, thank you. A lot of technical difficulties. Sorry about that. Good evening, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this town hall. And I want to briefly talk about racial profiling has been addressed time and time again. And yet the boldness of an officer killing a human being in front of the world to see is beyond unacceptable. This goes back to public lynchings of Black people. Many officers have the same mentality as those who killed Mr. Floyd. Our country is grieving. The Black communities are grieving. And our President of the United States will not address nor support the injustice towards Mr. Floyd and others. The NAACP, very aware that we have police officers in Norwalk that need sensitivity training and about others who should not be on the force. Racial profiling comes in many forms. The racism is not only on the police force, it's systemic in many organizations and school systems. I'll stop right there for now.
Thank you, Ms. Penn-Williams. I do appreciate you being here. Now we have Chief Kahalwick. Chief, thank you for joining us. If you would like to say a few words.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. First of all, can you hear me okay? Okay. I do have a few comments to make, but first let me start out that there's not one law enforcement officer or chief that I've spoken to, either in Connecticut and friends that I have that are outside the state, that I've met through the various channels, that's not disgusted by what they saw. No one in law enforcement wants to see what happened in Minnesota. And I think not only me, but my counterparts are all working to make sure that that doesn't happen here in Connecticut. And we're trying to do our best in various ways to try to do that. I'll address a couple of points that were made or questions that were asked earlier, but I just want to give you just a little rundown on the police department just quickly. About 20 years ago, then Chief Rilling put me in charge of community policing in South Norwalk when I was a lieutenant. And from that time, in 2001, I've come to understand more of the issues that were faced and have worked to try to build programming and build knowledge and build relationships, and have continued to do that throughout that time, as well as now as the chief. It's one of my priorities is to bring the community together. Prior to me being chief, again, our department was CALIA accredited, which is the International Accreditation, Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. And what that requires is that we abide by 484 standards, many of which deal with some of the issues that we're talking about today. And as a result of that, our policies and procedures have to maintain that compliance, and we're verified on that every 4 years. Because of that, a lot of the things that I've heard people talk about over the last several days, and especially today, I've been receiving numerous emails and phone calls from residents asking if we do X or Y or Z, or how our policies are arranged. And I'm fortunate to be able to say that, yes, our policies are in compliance with the things that people are looking for. Someone sent me an 8 can't wait tweet, actually, where there's 8 things that they say if police departments can do will help reduce what we saw. And all 8 of those things we're already doing here in Norwalk and have been doing for a number of years because of accreditation and because of trying to be on the forefront. We have, going to one of the points that I heard earlier about sensitivity training and bias training and that kind of thing. All our officers here received fair and impartial police training several years ago, which deals with implicit bias and trying to overcome that in your dealings. And prior to what we saw in Minnesota, as it turned out, I had reached out to the same company to do a refresher training, and I'm waiting for a bid on exactly what's required to have our train the trainer so we can bring that back to Norwalk and redo that again. All officers are receiving mental health awareness training. All officers receive de-escalation training, to one of the other points that was made. That's part of our regular use of force training that we have every year. And I will agree that we don't have enough of the mental health and crisis training. Unfortunately, there's so many mandates that the state puts on us for training that only a small piece is dedicated, as you mentioned, towards those issues. And that's something that needs to be addressed. And I sit on the Police Accountability and Transparency Task Force for the state. And some of the discussions we had in our early meetings before the COVID situation ended our meetings temporarily. We're meeting again on Monday via Zoom, but was dealing with this issue of mental health awareness and crisis intervention training to get officers more aware and how to deal with those issues so that they can de-escalate and not, so that they don't escalate. But what I don't want to go on too long, but what I will say is one of the greatest things that we have here that was brought here was our body camera program. Since then, we're one of the first police departments in the state to have body cams, and we outfitted all officers, I believe, July 1 of 2019. So about a year now, or over a year, maybe more than that. Time goes so fast. All officers are equipped with body cameras. Every complaint that we receive, we review closely and look at the body camera video. Every use of force regardless of the level of force, is reviewed by the shift commander, by the deputy chief, by myself. And we look at the body camera to verify what occurred, looking at the reports, and make sure that what we see is within policy and protocols. And we'll continue to look at. If there's ideas on something we can do better, I'm all ears. I work every day trying to find better ways to do things. I sit on a lot of national boards and state boards. I have access to local, state, and federal and nationwide information, and I bring that back to Norwalk to try to do the best we can. We're not perfect. I'm not going to say we are. I'd be crazy to say that, but we work every day trying to get to that point and make things better. So we're open. I'm listening, and I'm ready to hear what you have to say, and also answer any questions that anyone has.
Thank you, Chief. We appreciate that. I see we have been joined by Senator Chris Murphy. He was able to fit us into his very, very busy schedule, and I do appreciate him being on. And also, Senator Murphy, I truly appreciate, as I know everyone does, the strong voice you are for not only Connecticut, but for the entire country. You bring issues forward. You're not afraid to speak, and you speak out, and you put the issues out in front and have the courage to ask the questions that needed to be asked. So, Senator Murphy, thank you. And the floor is yours.
Mayor, thank you very much. Chief, thank you for your work and for your willingness to be a central part of this conversation. Appreciate the chance to be with you. I see that Bob Duff has joined as well. Thank you for his leadership on behalf of Norwalk up in the state capitol. Listen, I just want to make clear that myself and Senator Blumenthal and Congressman Himes are ready to be part of the team here. Nothing has changed in the sense that all that happened is that America got a view of what happens far too often in this country to Black men who are, unfortunately, for decades and centuries, been targeted and persecuted by a white hierarchy that is different, that uses different tools than it did years ago, but often results in the same outcome. And well, I think there are some really important things we can do at the federal level when it comes to policing reforms. As the chief said, and the mayor knows, really the most important conversations have to happen locally, because police departments are run by cities and by towns and by counties. And I think we can be part of a solution that delivers resources and delivers accountability. The body cam program that Norwalk has invested in is incredibly important, because there's no way to get better unless we know what's happening, unless we know which officers are operating far outside of the norm, and unless we have the data nationally to understand where the real problems are and where they aren't. Federal government is important because we can play an enforcement and an accountability role, and call out and address instances where departments are not following standards. But ultimately, those reforms don't mean anything unless they're implemented from the local level. So we're going to be taking a look at a host of reforms with respect to policing, but they will kind of be 16,000-foot reforms. The really important conversations are the ones that you're having. I frankly think the most important thing the federal government can do is expand this conversation beyond just policing. Norwalk is a diverse community, and it's the exception rather than the norm in Connecticut. Most communities in Connecticut aren't places where Black kids and white kids go to school together. We're one of the most segregated states in the nation. And I don't know that you can solve any of this if we continue to have separate experiences. If you grow up in neighborhoods where you have no opportunity to be a friend with a Latino child or an African-American child, I don't know that we can solve this if our schools continue to be all white schools or all schools with students of color. And we have to really do some work at the federal level and the state level to try to figure out how we make fundamental changes to how we live, how we go to school. Because if we don't understand each other's experiences through shared lived experiences, then I'm not sure how we overcome this. And so one of the things I'm frankly going to be talking a lot about, Mayor, is the way in which we permit housing and the way in which we choose how kids go to school. And we've got to broaden this conversation beyond just policing reform, beyond just criminal justice reform, all super important topics, to the big ticket items that are going to allow us to be able to put ourselves in other people's shoes, because we just can't do that today. And we're not doing that in a state like Connecticut. I'll just give you one stat on education and then I'll leave it here. Mayor, in the last 15 years, the number of highly segregated schools, meaning schools that have, I think, 80% or more, either white students or students of color, has doubled. In 15 years, nationally, the number of segregated schools in this country has doubled. I mean, how are we going to solve this problem if that continues to be the trend line? So a lot of that leadership can come from Washington. I'm in a position right now where I'm just trying to listen as much as I can and come up with the right agenda to respond. So I'm grateful to be part of this conversation today and work with all of you into the future.
Thank you so much, Senator Murphy. I also invited Senator Duff, who is the majority leader for the state of Connecticut Senate. We all know that, in Norwalk, we can do certain things, but this is a partnership of local, state, and federal, because we have to make sweeping changes throughout the entire country. And Norwalk can do things that affect Norwalk. And with the help of Senator Duff, we can help make change in the state of Connecticut. And with the help of Senator Murphy and his peers, we can make changes throughout the country. So Senator Duff, thank you for joining us. I know you had a previous meeting that I think you probably cut short, but thank you for joining in this very, very important discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. And it's always good to see my friend Chris Murphy on here as well, and appreciate his eloquent comments as always. What I think is really great as well is that, Mayor, I appreciate you putting this together, and we have our police chief, but I think it's great that we have faith leaders, we have Board of Ed members, council members, and we have NAACP, we have our First Lady there, I see as well. And so it really represents, as you say, all sectors of government, all layers of government, and how we all need to make sure that we're really in this together and that we are working together for a common purpose. And that really is to help to do some of the big things. I think, as Senator Murphy said, he's absolutely right when he talks about the fact that, this is a long systemic problem that is now people are seeing more and more because of technology. One, it has always existed for as long as we've been around, and that if we don't do things that are actually big things, that are hard things, that are really make some major changes, some of these things will continue on and won't change at all. So I agree in the fact that for us in Connecticut, and we've done a lot of work on, and Chief Kohalik has been really instrumental in a lot of this when it comes to excessive force, by police, when it comes to police accountability. We've done a lot of things here in Connecticut that other states have not done, and I think that puts us in a different place than most other states. That's not to say that Connecticut or Norwalk or the Norwalk Police Department are perfect in any stretch of the imagination, because none of us are, and we won't be, but we can always strive to be, and we can always strive to do better. But we have to deal with some of the effects of our communities that deal with issues of equality and issues of opportunity for folks. And so when we talk about how do we do that, for me anyway, it comes down to things like accessing education and having an education system that allows everyone to get to their fullest potential. A healthcare system, as we've seen with COVID-19, it's always been there, but COVID-19 has shown the cracks in the system, where we have people of color who are dying at a higher rate than people who look like me, and folks who are working in nursing homes, and they're not getting the proper PPE. And so, all these things have been just, there, but it is now being there on a more visible basis, I think, than in the past. And then obviously, what we're doing in the legal system, whether it's our policing or in our criminal justice reform. So, if we're really going to make change, we've got to make sure that we are thinking big, that we are working towards, making that change and being committed to doing so on all layers of government. So again, let's keep working in partnership. I do feel positive in the sense that, there's a recent poll that was put out today that showed that, most Americans are sympathizing with the protesters who are out there. I think that maybe 10 or 15, 20 years ago, that would not have been the case. So I'm glad that I think that our communities have moved in a better and a more positive direction. And I also want to just give a shout out to our Chief Kahawik and the police chiefs around the state, and also to the police departments for putting out positive statements. I think that has been very, very powerful. And again, that may not have happened 10, 15 years ago, but that's happening today. And I think that while some of that may be incremental, I think many of those things are also very important as well. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Senator Duff, and thank you for all you do on behalf of the state of Connecticut and the city of Norwalk. We do have a surprise guest. My wife, Lucia, joined us. She is very active on many boards and committees throughout the city of Norwalk, and very, very involved in the Latino community. And I'd like to ask her if she'd like to say a word or two, and from the perspective of, I can look over here and say that, from the perspective of the Latino community and what she sees there.
I am unmuted. Yes. Can everyone hear me? Yep. Okay, good. Thank you. Indeed, we do have much work to do. Okay, that's no surprise to any of us. But what we really need to do is we need to learn how to humanize before we can begin to heal. And that is paramount. But how we get there, that's how we all have to figure out. My concern amidst all of this is our children and how we are teaching them and how we are exemplifying for them the world that we're going to give them to inherit. That is very, very important. It's heavy on my mind. There is indeed a whole slew of areas and sectors that need to be worked on. We need to learn how to do that, each and every one of us. I thank you, Senator Murphy, for being here, for taking the time to be with us. Obviously, I thank everyone on this panel, but I'm here because it's important. It's important for me to be here on a number of levels and for a number of reasons, but I want to be part of the solution. That's a long time coming. And I want to say that we must not fear. Instead, we need to learn to value the diversity that we often talk about. Yeah, that's it. Thank you for having me.
Let me turn my volume back up. We're going to start going into the question and answer section, but I would like the chief, he and I had a conversation earlier, and he made reference to a document that was put out by an organization, and it was titled 8 That Can't Wait. Chief, you want to address that and what you told me?
Yeah, I wasn't aware of this until it was sent to me by a couple different people today, asking if our department, our policies were in line with what they call the 8 Can't Wait, 8 principles of policing that they were asking police departments across not Connecticut, but nationwide to adopt. And that was to ban chokeholds, require de-escalation training, require warnings before shooting, exhaust all alternatives before shooting, duty for other officers to intervene, ban shooting at moving vehicles, establish a use of force continuum and require all force to be reported. And I was happy to respond back to the individuals that contacted me that we've had that in our policies for, I can't tell you how long. What I will say is, although our policy bans chokeholds and has for some time now, after seeing the video from Minneapolis, I went back and re-looked at our use of force policy to see if it was specific enough to address that issue. And while, yes, it covered it, I didn't feel that it covered it to the point that I felt comfortable with. And today we're in the process of rewriting it slightly to really make it clear that even not a so-called chokehold, but what was done there cannot be interpreted as being okay. So our policy will be slightly revised, just with a little bit of wording to address that issue as well. And that's something we should have out to the officers tomorrow. It was being drafted. We've been in conversations by email as soon as right before this meeting as to the exact wording I was looking for, but that will be out tomorrow.
Also, if you would just make reference to the early warning system that we just authorized. You had one already, but
yes, the accreditation standards require that we have an early warning system for officers. So we track use of force, we track traffic accidents, we track sick time, all the different things to look at to see if an officer is having an issue that we can intervene with. However, the system we had was a pretty antiquated system. We were using an old piece of software that was kind of outdated. And as in the July 1st budget, we requested, and this is going back to July 1st, but the last July 1st budget we requested and were approved with a new, it's called IA Pro, Internal Affairs Pro. It's a online web-based system to track all that data and set parameters so that it'll automatically alert us, as opposed to a manual system, if we need to intervene with an officer and see if they've had accidents, if they've had sick time has increased, just to try to make sure that they're doing okay and that we can try to avoid any issues. And that's right now in the process. We're entering data in that as we speak.
thank you. That's a critical piece of data or software that will, again, early on indicate that some officer may be having a problem with using force too many times, too many car accidents, which could indicate other things, sick days that could indicate other problems that he may or she may be having. So it's an important tool that the officers and that the chief uses. So again, thank you. We're going to now open up to questions. We have a lot of questions that have been submitted. I will do my best to get to all of the questions. I will at some point pass questions off to different panelists that they may wish to address. And if somebody answers a question, another panelist may wish to add something. So certainly feel free to do that simply by unmuting yourself. We're going to start with the first question that is going to go to the chief. And it has the use of force policy in Norwalk been revised and reviewed, and where can I find it?
Okay, I covered a little bit of that
Yeah.
a second ago, but our policies are reviewed on a continuous basis. That's part of the accreditation process, is that we're always reviewing, we're always updating based on best practices. And like I said, our use of force policy itself is being reviewed again and revised as we speak. If the person, I don't have the question in front of me, but if the person would like to shoot me an email tomorrow or tonight, I'll be happy to send them a copy of that, or whomever would like to see it.
Thank you, Chief. The next question is from Melissa Harris. Can we decrease the budget of the police and use the extra money to hire more mental health professionals, social workers, community support people, so that conflicts can be solved without the use of police as often as possible. You know, we do and the chief can address this also if he wishes. We do a workload assessment for the police department once every accreditation period, which I believe now is back to 5 years, maybe, I'm not sure, 3. And we feel that the police department is staffed adequately, and to reduce it might not be the best idea. But what we did do, as you may or may not know, I just hired a social services professional and appointed him as my chief of community services. And he is putting together a consortium of all the nonprofits in the city of Norwalk, and they meet on a regular basis and they support each other, and they identify programs that exist, programs that might no longer be necessary, and programs that might not exist that might be necessary. And we're also looking at other positions within that social services program that will be needed based on what we find. So while we have not decreased the size of the police budget, we have increased our investment in the community services and social services area. This Babs folder is asking, District B has the majority of the population that is most likely to be the victim of police brutality in Norwalk, yet are not represented on this panel. Was someone invited but not able to attend? I think the question was asked before Ms. Brenda Penn-Williams was able to get on, but we also did ask Darlene Young, who is a District B representative on the Common Council, but was not able to be here at the last minute. I also just was advised, and this is an oversight on my part, and I apologize. I was just advised that Travis Sims is on as one of the participants, and I'm trying to reach out to him. I have reached out to Larry Manzi, who's going to try to contact him and ask him to join the panel. Diane La Rochella states, thank you, Mayor and all, for holding this forum. I believe this is an opportunity for great change and to re-examine how to reduce and remove the stain of racism, sexism, and hate. Thank you for your comment, Diane. I see the next question. The police officer in Minneapolis had 17 reports on his record. I indicate, as I just had the chief indicate, that would have been a huge red flag in the city of Norwalk with the early warning system, and would have sent the chief and the department into action to try to determine what the situation was and what the problems were. And as most people, I'm sure, have been made aware today, the news that the officer responsible for the murder of George Floyd has, they've increased the charges to murder in the second degree, and the other 3 officers have been charged as aiding and abetting in murder in the second degree. I know that that's a very small consolation, but at least it's a step in the right direction when people see strong action being taken by a police department, not willing to tolerate those kinds of things, and having the courage to do the things that need to be done, courage that we all need to have. Diane La Rochella is making some recommendations. Would we consider holding police commission meetings later in the evening so that working citizens can participate? It's interesting because we did first do that when I started taking over as mayor, and we still didn't have people coming to the meeting. We have a public participation session, but they, for some reason, we had very, very little attendance. So we moved it back a little bit, but I think it's critically important that we revisit that issue, because people do need to be able to access the police commission and to have the opportunity to be heard. She makes recommendation of creation of a civilian review board in order to include the public. You know, all things right now have to be on under discussion. There are some good and some bad points about a civilian review board. I know that many of them that were created no longer exist, but we have to look at some sort of a structure that we all can live with and feel comfortable with. She also asks if I would be willing to take President Obama's pledge to local mayors, including a review of police force policy. I took that oath the minute President Obama put it out. So I've already signed on to that. I'm going to push this one to the chief. How does the Norwalk Police Department currently address complaints against excessive force, misuse of power, and misconduct, and what will happen tomorrow and in the days, weeks, months, and years ahead to strengthen disciplinary actions, ongoing training, and removal protocols? I think the chief has answered a lot of that, but
I think I covered a lot of that earlier, but every complaint that is received, and actually, as I mentioned, in discussions with others yesterday, in the past, complaints used to be formal and they'd fill out a form, et cetera, et cetera. With the internet and things like that now, most of the complaints that I receive are by email, generally to me directly. But whatever complaints we receive, if it's a minor complaint, I usually just deal with it myself. I'll pull up the body camera, look at the reports, and see if there's any merit to it. If it's something that is more involved, that requires an investigation to take place, then that'll get assigned to the internal affairs lieutenant. He'll do a complete investigation, forward his report to me with recommendations, and then obviously then I'll decide if there were violations. And if there were violations, then hold a pre-disciplinary hearing with the officer where they have representation by the union. They present their side of what they feel is not a violation and why they should not be disciplined. And then I make the decision. And then depending on whether they agree with my findings or not, then it could go to the labor board at the state level for a final ruling. But any complaint that I get is handled in that manner. And I will say that in the last several years, and especially since our body camera program, I get very, very few complaints. And complaints dealing with excessive force in the recent past have been extremely low. In fact, I have trouble remembering in the last several months of a complaint in that regard. Most of the complaints are minor in nature, and I usually deal with them myself very quickly and get right back to the people with a response. I don't know if I got the whole question there, but I think I covered most of it. You're still muted, Mr. Mayor.
Next question is from Lindsay. You'll go right back to the chief. What is the diversity of the Norwalk Police Department?
Specifically, I don't know off the top of my head. What I will say is that we recruit in order to try to maintain a workforce that mirrors the public, mirrors our community. That's a requirement of the accreditation standards. I will say that over the past year to year and a half, 2 years, because of the drop plan with officers retiring, we've seen a reduction in the number of minority female officers on the department. We were doing pretty good there, and that's an area we're really working to recruit. But as far as women in general, as far as African-American, Latino, we're pretty close to the population demographics in the city. But again, we have seen a drop off a little bit in the last year to two because of retirements that we're trying to backfill.
Thank you. I know Senator Murphy has to leave in about 2 seconds, so I do have a couple of questions that I found for Senator Murphy. One is, can you talk more about your tweet on desegregating schools?
Sure. Well, I mentioned this at the outset. I'm just a believer that this is a moment that requires roots up change. And I think what plagues this country today is the inability for white people to understand what the daily existence of Black people is like. And that happens in part because we don't live together. We don't go to school together any longer. And I don't think it's enough to just teach white people what Black people go through. There needs to be a conversation. There needs to be an empathy that is built so that we don't build these systems of oppression. And so I And what I know is that the data also tells us that kids who go to school in integrated schools do better than kids who go to school in segregated schools. So we've got to do something about that. I've got a piece of legislation that would fund voluntary school desegregation programs. But I think that's likely just the tip of the iceberg. Connecticut's got to have a bigger conversation about whether we want to run 169 different school districts, whether there's a better way to do this, because our kids are just missing out. Our kids are missing out by not being able to go to school in environments that are racially diverse, that are ethnically diverse, that are religiously diverse, and that have a diversity of income. They're getting a poorer experience if they're only going to school with kids that are as rich or as poor as they are and are only the same race that they are. So that's something that, again, is mostly about local and state change, but we can pass federal legislation. And I've been talking about this for years. I just think now is a moment where we really need to have a hard conversation about that.
Thank you, Senator. There's one more if you have time.
Yep.
Is there any federal legislation that can help with police oversight, an independent review board or anything like that? Police should not be allowed to investigate themselves.
Well, I think you'll be seeing a package of reforms being proposed. I've been talking over the last 24, 48 hours, almost on an hourly basis with Cory Booker and Kamala Harris and others. So I think we're going to sort of take the best of the set of ideas that exist about how we can better provide some federal oversight and try to get our colleagues to get behind it. Again, the most important reform is really local reform. And so I'm encouraged by the conversation that's already happening in Norwalk. But the federal government, sometimes has to stick its nose into local affairs when things have gone badly wrong. It's only the federal government sometimes that prompts that kind of reform. And we had a police department in Connecticut, in East Haven, Connecticut, that had gone wrong. And it wasn't until the Federal Department of Justice came in and investigated the way that in that city, Latino residents were being treated, that reform was imposed from the outside. So that's occasionally got to happen. And we've got to give federal enforcement agencies more tools to do it. So I think you'll see a package of reforms being offered in the coming days.
Thank you. And I think because I appreciate you being here. If you do have to leave, we understand. You've got a very busy schedule, but thank you for taking the time to be here, Senator.
I'm going to hang around for a little bit longer to listen, but appreciate
Okay,
you keeping me a part of this conversation.
Senator Duff, that was a question that was based on the federal level. Could you give us an idea of some things that might be able to be done on the state level that might be looked at over the next period of time in the near future?
Yeah, you're talking about police accountability or education?
Police accountability programs, other kinds of things that would help reduce the level of police violence.
Well, like I said, also, Connecticut has been really, I believe, far ahead many other states as well. We've passed excessive force, we've passed police accountability bills over the years. One last year that I think was really great. One area we probably, well, a couple, I know there's other areas, but one that's off the top of my head that I know that we can do outside of the larger issues that I talked about before are ensuring that really every municipal police department has the body cams. Norwalk was doing it before anybody else was, and then it became where the state would pay for part of those cameras. And then I think every community should have them. And I think it worked. I think it's good for both the police and for the community to make sure that those are there. And so we're going to be looking at other things such as training and ensuring that even, when we have a lot of questions, I know when, and you probably know this too, Mayor and Chief Kahalik, when somebody is being interviewed to be a police officer, they go through a series of tests, and what is being done on an ongoing basis, is that enough? Is that adequate to ensure that we are weeding out maybe those who have either some symptoms of PTSD, whether maybe their views have changed, or they may be a little more radical in some of their some of the things that they've been doing. If as Chief mentioned, the new reporting system that Norwalk has, should that be replicated around the state? Because if that's more automatic, does that send out the red flags there as well? I think all those things are really important. I don't think there's an answer for any of this stuff, but again, I do think that it comes back to, along with what Senator Murphy talked about, education is a big part of it, and integration is a big part of this. Is having schools that are blended, that are not homogeneous, that people are able to, our kids are able to be with other kids who don't look like them, who may not have the same income as them, may have different experiences, cultural experiences as they do. I've born and raised here in Norwalk, as you are, Mayor, and I know Kadeem is as well, and others, that one of the best assets of Norwalk is our school system and the fact that it's always been diverse. Now, our diversity today is different than it was when I was a student, but nonetheless, it's still very diverse. And I think that is one of our greatest strengths that is not always celebrated and is recognized as it should be. So all those things I think are an important part of the solution, not an answer, but multiple answers on this, and a long arc towards justice.
Thank you, Senator. The next question is kind of an open question for anybody that wishes to answer. I'd probably throw it to Mr. Roberts first. What can be done today to make the lives safer, for Black men in the city of Norwalk? And I guess not only in Norwalk, but expand it to whatever you think might need to happen in order to protect the lives of people who might be more likely to be in danger.
Thank you, Marilyn. To be honest with you, I honestly believe majority of these things start within the homes. But when I spoke, I asked Chief about the actual mental illness piece and aspect of it. I really truly got to go back to the concept of home and the trauma that we face as African American males. We all come from different backgrounds, but majority of us come from low income housing, or mothers work 3 jobs. Fathers are not around due to certain situations, or fathers are dead or in jail. So we're forced to legit find a different route. I was blessed to have both parents in my life, but my counterparts weren't. So we tend to get back to the conversation of schools. And as Senator Murphy stated as well, desegregating the schools. But in Norwalk, we have different friends and we have different actual, I want to say like ethnicities. But as far as helping Black men just succeed in general, we need that guidance. But the guidance does come from the cornerstone churches. The guidance comes from mentors and different programs. So with that being said, we got to actually put the step forward to actually incorporate more programs within the city for the youth. I know one big thing that came across my table was a skating rink, but we don't skate. It's very difficult when we want to play basketball, when we want to play football, and we don't have the opportunities to do that because majority of the courts are not up to par with what we need it to be like. And we choose a different path. So when to answer that question simply is we just need more guidance. And within the city of Norwalk, as a Black male in general, like I told you earlier, like I used to, when I have a kid now, I can't teach him about certain things. I have to teach him about when he gets pulled over. First off, you need to just take a quick second and show your hands. That's the new norm now. It's not get pulled over and get your license and registration. This right here is saving everyone's life. This right here is saving everyone's life, but in the same sense, as you can see in the George Floyd situation, it's killing us as well. So we need that guidance. We need those people in the council, mayors, NAACP people, pastors. We need that cornerstone because this is all we have.
You know, Mr. Mayor, I want to add on to some of what Kadeem was saying.
Yes, Mr. Azima.
Thank
you, Mr. Roberts.
Living in acknowledging some of the trauma, that students of color faced. One thing that I think would be helpful, or even to just have a discussion about, would be further engaging the police in training that around restorative work that the schools are adopting. You know, when I look at intentionality of really being able to demystify experiences that students have that just really help recreate an understanding with police, engaging them in our restorative work really helps minimize occurrence of traumatic reenactment and situations that just contribute to what youth have continuously been played with over the media and just that feeds into some of their contextual concerns around engagement with police. You know, the more mindful officers are in being able to engage with youth when they're extremely escalated, you know, and being extremely aware of the challenge, you know, officers have in being called to a school scene for emergency related issues. The need to have officers trained or aligned with our restorative work is a very concrete step that can, I think, change, at least increase safety, feeling of safety for youth in the community. You know, and it's something that I think also will help benefit just mindset approach. You know, I appreciate the cams and all the electronics, but these are reactive things that people are planning for and just living in a safety net that's just gonna catch someone doing the wrong thing. I really think it's important we look to adopt strategies that are really preventative in nature. You're on mute, Mr. Mayor.
Basically, I was asking if anybody else wanted to address that question. The question was, what can be done today to make the lives of Black people in Norwalk safer? And I know, Reverend Clark, you had a couple of comments, Mr. Burnett, Ms. Penn-Williams, you know, you represent a lot of the constituents that we're here to talk about and figure out how we can build those relationships and make for equity and justice for all. So I don't know if you have any comments you want to add about that or question.
Well, let me come in. What can make life better for the minority community, specifically African Americans? One is probably looking at helping minority business owners in the city or helping minority business. The other piece that we have to take into consideration for the good of all people is that of hearing the voice of our people and being concerned about this what we call affordable housing. That is a serious concern within the African American community because most of the places we have considered affordable is really not affordable for our people. And there are a couple of African Americans in Norwalk that are somehow compelled to leave the city. So these are some of the things that we must look into. The other piece is our young people. You know, when they graduate from colleges, universities, you know, they have to move down North Carolina or other states to find a job. And it is impacting our community and our well-being as a society. And so that's what I will advocate, that we look into and see how we can help remedize some of these challenges.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Burnett or Ms. Penn-Williams?
Yeah, I think we really have to focus on changing the culture. We have to focus on changing the mindset. You know, every person of color is not a criminal, and every policeman should not be viewed as a threat to someone's life. I know for me personally, growing up, one of my mentors was a policeman. You know, he was what they called a beat cop. He walked the streets and we all knew him by his first name. and he knew us by our first name. He knew our parents. And there was a relationship that if you had a situation, you went to the police for help. You knew they was there to help you. And I think we've lost that. We've totally lost that. As a, you know, as a Black man driving, not only in Norwalk, but anywhere, you have a sense of uneasiness. You have a sense of tension that if a police car pulls up behind you, that something bad might very well happen, and that should not be the case, especially if you've done absolutely nothing wrong. So we have to change the culture. We have to change the mindset, and I think that starts with education, both with the
You ready?
further sensitivity with the police force and also in the community. We have to reach into the community and begin to educate each other that every situation should not end as a bad situation.
Thank you. Ms. Penn Williams?
I think that racism in Norwalk is it's systemic, okay? So first, like Greg was saying, education. So when these kids go to school, they already looked upon that whatever neighborhood they come from, they're not gonna be anything. So that's how they're treated. They're not treated with respect in these schools. They already have a notion that so-and-so is gonna be bad. So by the fourth grade, you know who's gonna do what type of person they're gonna be. And we have to stop doing that. We have to start treating folks with respect, okay? My thing is, we all are different colors. I'm as black can be, okay? But I like being Black. I think I'm beautiful, okay? And I think that we need to stress to our Black brothers and sisters, the kids, they are beautiful. There's nothing wrong with being Black, okay? We bleed like you bleed. We think like you think. And once that starts, people start treating us with respect and not looking at us through our skin color and looking at us as a human being. I think we will have a lot of different results. But as it starts out when these kids go to school. That's when it starts. And like Greg said, we have to change that culture. We really do.
Thank you. The next one, Chief, you can answer this one relatively quickly. First, thanks to the MPD for their patience and support last Sunday during the George Floyd protest across I-95 and Connecticut Avenue. Officer Ramirez would have been proud. A quick question to the Chief: is self-policing the police encouraged? I understand the brotherhood within the department, but I hope certain officers would hold others accountable for their actions if they acted inappropriately towards the citizens of Norwalk. You can address that quickly, and then also, do we have access to your policies and procedures?
Okay, the first part, that's always a concern, and that's something that I hear quite often is, are we able to police ourselves? And I take that as a personal commitment myself. And what I can say is that that's something that I look at every day. And I feel very confident that I have the ability to do that and to hold my officers accountable when I find that their actions are inappropriate. Similarly, I have confidence in my lieutenant that's in charge of professional standards right now and the ones prior, that they're going to do a fair investigation. And I also review those carefully when it's something serious like that, where it's required, and follow up on that and make sure that in my mind, I'm comfortable with the decisions that were rendered. So in some respects, yeah, I have to say that the community has to trust that I'm going to do the right thing. I can only say that I try really hard to do that. And I hope that I've built that reputation for that, but that's the best I can do right now, is to just say that I will try to do the right thing. As to our policies and procedures, yes. Matter of fact, we were working on getting them in a format where we can put them on the city website. That hasn't happened yet, but that's something I'm looking at. But again, I will throw out there that if there is a specific policy that somebody is interested in, we'll be happy to email that out, or, well, the way it is now, I guess, email it out to them. And I had one person email me already asking for our use of force policy, which I'll have sent tomorrow. So we will work to get that posted on the website so that it's just easily accessible. Right now, our civilian complaint process is on the website. That's posted, but not the entire director's manual is not. It's a very big policy manual.
Thank you, Chief. This would be for Mr. Azima. From Shauna Reed, are we going to incorporate diversity training for teachers?
Yes, there is a very intentional plan currently being put in place right now with our new incoming superintendent, Dr. Estrella. This came off of the heels of the public commitment that was made by myself and other board members back in October during our debate where we invited, sorry, I forget the name of the people who facilitated the debate, I forget their name. But the following from that, a social justice committee has been created, which I'm the liaison for. Some of the work we put in place this year was actually a joint training between Board of Ed members and the Common Council. Due to COVID, executing that plan was trumped. Going into next year, some of the work will be driven by efforts around looking at data through an equitable lens, really being able to identify, distinguish where disproportionality exists within our school system, and shaping the board members, leaders, and school officials, and looking at data within that lens of equity, just to help reshift our mindset. I don't have concrete details and dates to give you for when those trainings will take place, because that's something that is planned currently being made. But yes, we will be doing that.
Thank you. I know this is not a question that I have up here, but a thought just occurred to me, Ms. Penn-Williams. Could you briefly just describe the NAACP Justice Committee? I think it's called Justice Committee, and what the function is, and how people who feel that they wish to discuss a problem could reach out to you?
Okay. We have what they call a redress committee,
Yes.
which addresses that. Andre Williams is the chair. If you have a complaint, you go on our website, you download the complaint, and you fill it out, and you send it in, and we will address it. We have, we've been having several complaints about, one complaint, I don't know, we just got a complaint about the other day, this kid was marching, and after the march, he was arrested because he posted something on YouTube about a police officer, and the police officer said if he doesn't take it down, there are going to be consequences for him. So we're trying to investigate that. But we get many complaints. And when I get a complaint, a lot of times I call the chief, and I'll go and sit in this office and we'll talk about it. So the chief and I, we really have a good I think we have a good relationship. But we do have on our website where you could put in a complaint, and it's the redress committee.
Thank you, Ms. Penn-Williams. Let me look at a couple of other questions here. I know it's 8:30, but this is an important topic, and we want to make sure that we give it the time that we should. So let me see. There was one question up here I thought that I wanted to get to. I'm trying to get through questions that haven't been addressed in any way, shape, or form. One is, Mayor Willing, would you be open to convening a community group to create recommendations on police reform? We had that discussion with my staff, and the answer to that is unequivocally yes. Years ago, we had the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Commission on race relations, and they generated a document that was probably a couple of hundred pages long. One of the things that I want to do is pick that up and take a look at what the recommendations were, what the findings were, see, get a group together to look through that and see if those issues are still issues today, what has been done, what has not been done. But we want to reach out and we want to make sure that we get the right people on this committee. We want to get a broad section of the community. We want young people. We want young people of color. We want people who may feel disenfranchised, because we don't want this to be a committee. One of the questions that I'm looking for now said that this group, the panel here makes it seem like there's no problems in the city of Norwalk. I don't think that's the case. I think we're kind of making sure that we identify those problems. We want to listen to people, and we want to make sure that we move forward and put in place a working group. One of the things I first said when I opened up this meeting, some people may have not been on this on the site when I first talked about it. I said that, you know, I've been in law enforcement and service as mayor for a total of 48 years in the city of Norwalk. And I've seen situations where we respond to them, we sit down and we have a meeting, and then we make some sort of a commitment and we all walk away, and pretty soon things start to calm down, and that's it. We kind of forget that we had those meetings and we wait until the next time. And that's not acceptable anymore. I said that this is not a feel-good meeting. This is not a meeting that we can sit here and feel good and pat ourselves on the back. This is a meeting that will be the precursor for a lot of hard work that needs to be done. And I'll be looking to some of the people on this panel and others to tell me who needs to be a part of our working group, who needs to be a part of the process, and how we can make things better in the city of Norwalk. Because if we set an example for Norwalk, an example for other communities in the state of Connecticut, then Connecticut gets better, and then the entire country gets better. So it has to start someplace, and we're willing to make that commitment tonight to see that it starts here. I just wanted to address that question. And yes, we will be convening a meeting. And I believe, Chief, I think you may have already said this, and this question may have come in after. Can you read off the 8 things that you're already doing, the 8 that can't wait?
Yep, I talked about that earlier, but going back to that, that's banning chokeholds and strangleholds, require de-escalation training, require warnings before shooting, exhaust all alternatives before shooting, duty for officers to intervene if they see something happening, ban shooting at moving vehicles, establish use of force continuum, and require all force to be reported. Those are the 8 that were mandated. I just saw a tweet. Unfortunately, I just saw a tweet that said that only 2 of the top 100 cities in the United States abide by all of those 8. The other 98 do not. So I'm proud to say that we do. We're not one of the top 100, but at least not in size, but maybe in other ways.
Thank you. Let me see if I can find a couple of questions. I don't know if this really can be answered by the council, but I'll throw it out to the council members. How will the Common Council and Budget Finance Committees continually address the inequities that currently exist in housing, education, incarceration, and the justice system? That's a very broad question, but perhaps Greg, as chairman of the Common Council Finance Committee and a former member of the Board of Estimate and Taxation, you can kind of ask, just touch on that briefly.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it is a very broad question. I think one of the things that, well, several things that we can do is really push back on the budget requests as they come in, and keep those issues at the forefront of our questioning of the budgets. We work directly with the various department heads as they submit their budgets. And as we review those budgets, we have to ask those tough questions. And in some cases, we have to push back and say, are you addressing these issues? Are you addressing housing? Are you addressing the quality of life for people all across the city? And how do these budgets play into making Norwalk the best possible place for everyone? We do ask those questions now, but we have to raise the level of that inquiry and also ensure that there's an equitable distribution of whatever funding we have available to address the needs of everyone across the city. And with a focus on those that are disenfranchised and may not be receiving the proper housing and care that that they should be receiving as residents of Norwalk. So we can create the environment to make things right. And I think it clearly rests on the shoulders of us as elected officials on the Common Council to ask those questions and push back when we need to ensure these issues are being addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. One question could go to Mr. Roberts. The question was, Mr. Roberts, have you or any of your friends ever experienced inappropriate behavior towards you from a police officer that you felt were unjust and that were based on a race?
So that was a main thing that did occur when we started publicizing this actual event. Majority of the constituents in the city named two actual officers. And then, you know, they started to speak about actual events in the city. So definitely growing up in Norwalk, everything was not always peaches and cream. I've came across difficulties with officers before. Some have been easy cases and some have not. I personally can recall like 2 or 3 cases of how I would have to use my voice instead of my person as my color because you're nervous. And at the same sense, you know, you don't know what to do. You don't know how it could end. So the main thing that I'm guessing whoever asked this question, they basically are asking the question to not just me, but to the chief, the mayor, everybody in the city. We've had numerous situations that happened in the city recently, and I got an email probably about 30 minutes before this, and they want to know what's the actual protocols as far as an ongoing speed chase within the city. Because we had a young man that we lost by the name of Mumbai, who was in Norwalk and was killed in New Haven by cops, whom had a knife and who was shot 7 times. Then we had another man by the name of Vincent Folks, who was killed in Norwalk in a whole car accident while on a public road in a high-speed chase. So they ask these questions to find out, because when that one thing affects them, it affects the generation after and after. And they tense up every time they see a cop, and they don't have the words to explain or the voice. So that's basically, I'm guessing that's what the question definitely should be.
All right, thank you. 2 questions from Reverend Ewell for the chief. One, do you consider profanity a form of excessive abuse? And number 2, what happens if there's a complaint and the body camera was not activated or not turned on?
As far as the first part of the question goes, it would depend on the context that the language was used. And what I mean by that is there are situations where that type of language, because of the language being used against the officer, it may be appropriate in order to de-escalate something. It sounds strange to say that, but sometimes that does work to show someone that the officer is serious, so to speak. Then again, there are situations where it might be completely out of line. So it would be a case by case basis that we'd have to look at to determine whether I thought that it was appropriate or not. To the second part was body.
Oh, what happens if there's a complaint against an officer and the body camera was not activated or not turned on?
Correct. Our policy requires that an officer, first of all, they have to wear the body camera. It's in buffer mode, which means that it's always recording the last 30 seconds, but it's not saving that recording. Once they activate it, then it goes back 30 seconds to capture what has already occurred, and then from there on forward. Our policy requires that that be activated, generally almost in every police encounter, there are certain situations by state law that they cannot record. But aside from those state mandates, everything else should be recorded if they're having police interaction with the community. And if an officer fails to do that, they're subject to disciplinary measures, including suspension if necessary.
Thank you. We still have 92 questions pending. So I'm trying to scroll through them and getting to ones that have not been asked. They're new questions because a lot of them are asking pretty much the same kind of a question. Also, the ones that are designated for Senator Murphy, I know Mr. Smith has one that was, unfortunately, Senator Murphy had to leave. So this other one, Ms. Penn-Williams, when is the next NAACP meeting and how can I attend? I am a member. That was from EC Foster.
I don't know. I'll talk to my board to see when they want one. I just received a text as well. So we'll put something together and I will let people know. Being that we are in this pandemic, we really have not been meeting. We've been meeting with the e-board, but we have not been having meetings. So we will try to get a meeting soon.
Thank you. This one, I'm going to pass off to Senator Duff. It deals with that 8 can't wait again, and I believe you might have heard what those 8 are. Will you commit to pursuing the 8 can't wait statewide?
I think we should do as much as we can, obviously, and as Chief Kahalik said, Norwalk already does a lot. I think other communities should be following suit, and that we should continue on a lot of the reforms that we've done. I think you'll see a lot of the items that are there are things that we already have on the books and that have been predicated by state law. But as I said earlier too, that there's there's more to do, and we'll be looking at all those things. So I think we should be, provided, the 8 number, those things just came out today. I think we need to make sure we look at those things and to see if actually they really work, and they'll have a positive impact on the community. And if they do, then we should do them. But just because they're put out there doesn't mean they may or may not work. But I think we should everybody should have a voice around the table. This is why we have public hearings up in Hartford, and that we should look at that in totality to make sure that it fits along with a lot of the other reforms that we've already had in the state of Connecticut.
Yes, and Mr. Azima, I think you wanted to mention the name of that group that you spoke about. Yeah.
Connect was the name of the group that had facilitated debate that I was referencing, where we had publicly committed to moving this work forward in the school. I just wanted to make sure that I had put that out there.
Thank you. And thank you, Senator Duff, for your answer on the 8 that can't wait. My question is for Kadeem. As a big voice in Sunday's event, what advice or how would you educate the younger generation of Norwalk on this matter?
Honestly, the first thing I would say is we need more of these, Mr. Mayor. These are actually very beneficial to the community. And as far as, we as government officials, we need to make sure we're actually putting it out more into the community as well. Social media is awesome, but we have some people that don't own computers. So getting it out there via mailers and all the above, definitely. And I'm open. I'm open, and I'm gracious to be where I am today. But I'm more so gracious to have everybody that's reaching out to join and to push forward this needle, because it's a very important matter. And you know, this is something that's very important, not just only to me, but to those that are African-American within the culture. So definitely these actual town halls, and I truly appreciate you, Mr. Mayor, for even doing this tonight. We need to, as a collective unit, do our own as well and invite, you know, the community.
Absolutely, and thank you. There's one that I have to read. It's from a young person named Vivian, and I am 11 years old. What can I do to help? Vivian, there's many opportunities, and with your attitude and your desire at such a young age, I want to thank you. There are so many needs in the city of Norwalk with raising funds to help people that need help. Something as simple as making donations to the food bank because of food insecurity that we have here in the city, especially in view of the virus. Just put your head together, or put your head together with some of your friends and come up with a lot of different ways. And certainly if you need some thoughts and ideas, you reach out to my staff and I'm sure we'll find something that you can do. Let's see. There's something.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to just bring up one issue that maybe Chief Kahala can just talk on real quick as you're scrolling through some questions. I think Kadeem had kind of touched upon this a little bit as well, but you know, policing has changed over the last 20 or 30 years or so. It's different now, and Mayor, you would know this as a former police chief, but it's different now than it was back in the 70s and 80s and maybe 60s. To how officers are trained now, or how they are, you know, how they're expected to act now, you know, based on community policing. And I was wondering if the chief could just talk a little bit about maybe how policing has changed over the last 10, 15, 20 years, so that maybe the community, you know, and folks get a better understanding of what is expected now and how has the role changed based on, you know, how the current policing models.
Yeah, thank you. Number one, I would say that I could tell you when I've been on 37 years, I guess now. And when I came on, policing was very much a very authoritarian type of situation. You expected people to do exactly what you told them to do without question. It was not a conversation, so to speak. That's one of the main changes that have occurred over the last 30 years, and especially over the last 10 or 15 years. It's become more of a partnership with the community than an us versus them. Unfortunately, we still see that, and you know, we're trying to work to do a better job of getting away from that. But I think one of the things is it's more of a partnership. There is more conversation. We expect officers to do a lot more. It's a much more complex job than when I came on. Officers are expected to know a lot more. The laws are more complex. The types of calls that they handle are much more complex. The mental health crisis that we face, there are so many people that are on the streets that need mental health and can't get it. Or they don't take medications that they should be taking because they don't have someone to care for them. So the officers are faced with a lot of crises in the streets where they have to deal with those people. And it's tough. So we're asking a lot of the police officers. The training compared to when I went to the police academy, I'm not going to ask the mayor what training he had back when he went, but when I went to the police academy, it was 12 weeks. And I came back to the department and they said, here's the keys and take off and handle calls. Now it's 20, well, it's going to be even more, but I think it's 27 weeks right now. And then there's 12 weeks at least of field training, not to mention in-service training. The training standards have increased dramatically. There's a lot going on, and we have a lot of balls in the air always in trying to address a lot of mandates. You know, no offense to Senator Duff, but the state puts a lot of mandates on us with different legislation that comes out that we have to deal with. So we're being pulled in a lot of directions, and it gets difficult. And I think sometimes, you know, we lose focus a little bit on some of these kind of things because we're running here and there trying to address other issues. But we need to get back and grounded again into into the public and dealing with the public, and that's our primary focus.
Thank you, Chief.
May I just wanted to
go ahead.
comment. I just want to comment that I know we have 95 questions in the chat area, but I just wanted to pose a question or present that, using this momentum that we have right now, and we're not going to solve all the problems tonight, but
No.
what can we come out of this discussion with in terms of concrete actions or action that we will take going forward to address the issue and move towards making things better in Norwalk? Because as was stated, it's not perfect in Norwalk, but how can we make it better, move towards making it better? What specific concrete actions can we take? I know you mentioned the, signing on to President Obama's promise as the mayor, but, maybe just tossing it out, the question of this panel, what can we do collectively to make a concerted difference immediately?
Fred, can I answer that? I
Yes.
think what we need, they keep saying we're a diverse community. We need more Black teachers. We need more Hispanic teachers. We need more Black police officers. We need more Black fire men. So we need to make the government look like our community. And we need to have more respect for one another. And then, a police officer may walk by, see you on the street, and then these kids are saying to me, they are being harassed just for being on the street. That's not right. I just want to see that we all treat each other with respect. That's what's missing here. There's a lot of disrespect out here. And if we start respecting one another, I don't think we would have those problems that we have. And if we start having in our school system, Black history programs, Hispanic programs, we need to have everything reflect the community that we live in. And I think that we will have a better community. Now, saying that, I don't know if that will happen. I know they just had a fire test, and then they did their interviews and all of that. I don't know the status of that or how many Hispanics, how many, well, let me just say minorities applied and went on to the next step. But that's what we really need. We need to have some type of training to allow the minority population to not feel, because all these tests are biased. So we need to start having training so that they can be a part of the community. They could test as well as the others test. So that's how I think that we could start off today by doing that. I do have some, I want to say something at the end that I have written down. So I do want to say, but I think it should start in these schools to treat these kids better than they are being treated. And they're not being treated right. They're not getting the programs that they are needed, the services that are needed. And we got to start looking at that. We really do. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Ben-Williams. There's a question from Sharon Benante. Would you be willing to create a paid position within our city entirely dedicated to deconstruct systemic racism within the city? This position could work with our city officials, each of your departments, a newly created commission, and our community. This position would work to create a detailed plan of actionable and measurable items throughout the city. You said it yourself that we need to follow through, and this would set us up to make certain that there is follow through, accountability, and continued measurable progress. That's a long question, but yes, we're looking at any options. This is, as I said earlier, this is the beginning, not the end. This is the beginning of a much needed structured process to determine anything and everything that we need to do to end racism, to create a city of equity and justice, to make sure that people in our streets feel safe, and to identify racism anywhere and everywhere it exists, and to make sure that we eradicate it and make sure that we do everything possible. And as Mr. Burnett mentioned earlier, is this something that's going to happen by Monday or next week or Tuesday of next week or next month? This is an ongoing process. This is something that has been ingrained in many communities, and we need to make sure that wherever it exists in Norwalk, we identify it and eradicate it. So in answer to your question, Sharon, all issues are on the table. There is nothing, when we sit down and we start talking about these things, we have to have the courage to ask the right questions, and we have to have the courage to come up with the right answers, and we have to have the courage to implement, and we have to have the courage to look introspectively and look at our community and not try to gloss over anything that we find. We need to have the courage to bring it out and to make sure that we can do whatever we can. So I know there's a long answer, but that was kind of a long question. So will these meetings continue weekly or monthly? Dale Smith wants to know. That's yet to be determined. Obviously, the more often we can meet and identify different things, I think the first step, as I mentioned, is to look at the Blue Ribbon Commission report on race relations in the city of Norwalk and determine the things that are still valid, what things were supposed to happen that didn't, what things that were supposed to happen that did, and were they implemented effectively. So there's a lot of work ahead of us. So we'll be looking to generate documents, information, and a process that will make sure that we move forward in the appropriate way. I think, Chief, I think you've answered this, but I'll give it to you quickly again. I think body cameras are great. Do they turn on automatically? Do they require the officer to turn them on? And if the cameras require an officer to activate them, are there any repercussions? I think you already answered that one. Do you want to just briefly touch on that again?
Yeah, just really quick. Yeah, they're always in buffer mode for 30 seconds at all times. But the officer does have to then activate the recording when he gets a call for service, or if there's going to be an interaction. They then record. The officer ends the recording at the end of that. The officer, at the end of his shift, puts it into a docking station. It automatically uploads that video to a cloud-based software server. It can't be tampered with. It can't be edited. It can't be deleted. It goes to the server. It maintains on the server. If it's a routine call, by state mandates, there's certain time limits for different types of calls. So routine calls will be automatically purged after 90 days, I believe it is. And then other calls, maybe a year, and calls where there's a complaint made or something like that, those are held pretty much indefinitely on the server. And then if they're needed for court or for whatever, for review later on. And if an officer is required to use the body camera, if they fail to do it, then there's disciplinary repercussions if they don't.
Thank you. And Gloria asked if I would sign Obama's pledge. I think I mentioned I already have done that. Zarek is concerned that we have high-profile people on the panel here. They want to bring in more members of the community. Yes, that will be occurring as we move forward. Serafina, my husband Serafino and Audrey, I guess that I know Audrey. I want to strongly recommend putting cops on the beat again, where officers know their community and trust is built in the community members towards the police. Also, if you study the miracle that was Woodstock, the security team that kept things in order was called the Peace Force, an excellent moniker for going forward today. Chief, I know we have an expanding, and we've been expanding the community police department and efforts. And I know we've talked about the opportunity to do it to an even greater degree. So I know the chief is committed to community policing and getting officers on the beat. And a lot of the officers are, and unfortunately we lost one of the best community police officers, the guy that if you looked in the manual under community policing, it would have been his picture there. And that was Officer Ramirez. And he wrote the manual on how to do community policing. Let's see. trying to get to some questions that perhaps haven't been answered. Janet Evelyn is saying we need to continue these kinds of things. New York Times recently wrote an article on how nothing happens. I mentioned earlier that to a degree, we've all been guilty of that. You know, we always respond when something happens. We have a couple of meetings, a feel-good meeting, and pretty soon we walk away and move on to the next issue. We cannot do that anymore. I said before, this is not the end. This is not a feel-good meeting. This is a meeting to get the process rolling. This is just the beginning. Let's see what else we've got. We still have 89 questions, but I'll try to get to a couple of them. Chief, you might want to answer this, and I know this, how are officers evaluated for mental health?
Yeah, in order to be hired by state mandates through the Police Officer Standards Training Council, there's certain guidelines. So every officer has a complete background check, which includes a polygraph and a psychological exam by a doctor that's certified and trained specifically to try to assure that we don't get officers with the wrong intent, so to speak. Once they're on the job, only if we see that there's some issue where we then can order a fit for duty evaluation is what it's called, where we can send them back to that same or a similar doctor, psychologist, and have them evaluated again to assure that they're still fit for duty. And that has occurred here and there. But by and large, the main screening tool is at the time of hiring. And I think might have been Senator Duff or somebody mentioned earlier about maybe looking at increasing that, which is probably a good idea over a period of time. I'm not sure how that would fit in with things and budgets and everything else, but that's something to consider, some type of ongoing routine evaluation, so to speak.
Thank you. I see that we have been joined, thank you, by State Representative Travis Sims, who is also a former council member. Travis, thank you for joining. Would you like to make a comment?
Sure, Mayor. Thank you, and thank the other colleagues that's on the panel here today. First, I want to apologize to all my constituents of the 140 district for my tardiness on this call, as I just received a link to participate on this platform. I'm honored to be here, and I'm here to answer any questions that anyone may have. Thank you.
A lot of the issues that have come up relative to the state and federal government. I know we can do things here in Norwalk. I believe, Norwalk has to do so much more. We always try to do as much as we can, but we need to do so much more. But we also recognize that the state and federal governments have a huge part in helping to eradicate systemic racism. Do you have any thoughts that you'd like to mention on that? You're muted. There you go.
I'm sorry. Well, Mayor, with everything that's going on now, the climate that's going on now throughout this country, it's vitally important that we do set up some parameters. We set up some, we work closely with my colleagues up at the legislature to make sure that we implement new legislation that addresses a lot of these systemic concerns that's been plaguing the African American community for over a century. And I think that it's going to take everyone from the federal level, state level, and local level to work in concert with one another to make sure that we're being thought forward and making sure that we are working together and collaborating together to make sure we put in those policies and procedures that protect our communities here and around the state and around the country.
Thank you very much. One question that I have here asked me when I was police chief if I fired any police officers, and the answer was yes. I fired several. And when the issue is such that a termination is desired, or is appropriate. It's not a difficult decision because not every police officer is, not every police officer should wear the badge of honor. The police officer's badge is a badge of honor. I was proud to wear the patches of the Norwalk Police Department. I know discipline is a very, very important part of the police department. Police officers in a time of peace, they're the only organization, the only people that have the right under certain circumstances to take a human life. And that's an awesome responsibility. And we must only have the police officers with the highest degree of integrity, the highest capacity for judgment, compassion, and use of force should only be as a last resort. And never, never, never what we saw the other day in Minnesota. So Chief, I don't know if you want to talk about discipline in the police department.
Yeah, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly. But I think even beyond, termination, it's the little things. I think that's where it starts. And I think that's where we have to be cognizant of taking care of the little things before they escalate to become the big things. So sometimes just the small things and just being on the lookout for that and, making those minor corrections so that you don't get these big sensational issues that occur. Because a lot of times that's what happens. As in life, you avoid the little things and they just develop and foster.
Crystal wrote a long question for Senator Murphy about police unions. I would recommend that she reach out directly to him. We still have 95 questions and 96 people on, so I'm going to try to get to them as quickly as we possibly can and scroll through some of them that are repetitious. Mr. Azima and Ms. Penn Williams, do we believe there's rampant racism in our public schools? My children attend public schools and I never hear anything about it. So this is a question just asking if you believe that it exists.
In all honesty, I've been anywhere where I haven't seen racism or experienced it. And for me to say no to that question would just completely be disrespectful of the purpose of what's happening here. To what extent a variation of how it exists, I don't have details and facts and context to give you examples, but I'm confident it does, just based off my experience. Within the same light, I know, and Brenna, you can chime in here. There's some work that Brian McMahon had started around organizing a response to some of the egregious events that took place at the school earlier this year. And it's a start, but it's nothing that's addressed the work. Brenda, anything, feel free to chime in, correct?
I think there is racism. I'm not calling the current superintendent racist, I'm not. But I'm saying this, that he hasn't responded publicly to this incident to assure the families that the families and students feel supported by the district. And this type of racism is not tolerated or accepted in our school system. So that has not happened. But I am not calling him racist. But a lot of things that happen, you can say there is racism in the school system. Like I said, like you take SPED. The minority kids in SPED are not getting the services that are needed. They are not. If they don't have an advocate, oh well. Okay, and I know this for a fact. I'm just not just saying this. I know it for a fact. And then when they think you want to help these kids, and it's me, they think you want to help these kids, they tell lies on you. And they've told lies on me. Okay, so, and all I want to do, and I have the same goal as them, is to make sure these kids are educated. That's all, that's my agenda. I want everybody to have the same, be fair, and I want them to be fair to these kids and have the same agenda that I have to educate these kids, which they're not being educated properly. And I happen to know that. It's a fact. I happen to know it. Some kids get it better than others. If you have money, of course, you're going to be able to get a well-versed education. If you do not have money, you're going to get what you get. Okay, so a lot of times these parents, minority parents, go into the schools, they have PPTs, and when they leave out of there, they're crying. I get a lot of phone calls. For instance, I went to 2 PPTs, and the parent said to me, I am so glad you came with me because they didn't treat me that way when I went by myself. So when I go with these parents, they have respect. When I'm not with them, all hell breaks out. All hell breaks out. So I just think that there is a lot of racism. And with the new superintendent, who happens to be a minority, I think things will change. I think there's going to be a lot of changes. And I'm still waiting for Dr. Adamowski. Like you, Harry, you sent out a letter about this nonsense happening in Minneapolis. We haven't heard from the superintendent. We have not heard from him. When are we going to hear from him?
Thank you, Brenda. Wendy Bowden wants to thank all of us and Senator Murphy and everybody for being on the panel. This next question can go to any of the elected officials. Do the council members or state reps or senators hear from their districts about issues with police, and are there patterns to report and are there patterns or processes, I guess, to are there patterns to the reported issues? I'm sorry. So that can go to any of the representative. Basically, do you hear from your constituents about police problems, and do you notice any patterns?
Mayor, I can speak to that. My answer to that question is, as a state representative, I hear constantly from constituents who has been harassed or what they considered as racial profiled by police officers. And my advice to them is to always contact the police department and file a complaint against that particular officer. I would assume that there's some kind of metrics that's set up to, whereas if that officer has a pattern of racial profiling, that I would imagine that his superiors would bring him into the office and sit him down and ask him some tough questions about his practices in the field. Having said that, personally speaking, I know from personal experience of my involvement with police and things of that nature, and it is intimidating to the general public and to folks that look like me in the Black and brown community. So there's a fear there, but at the same time, I do understand that they have a job to do as well. But with that said, we know far too often that you have a lot of overzealous police officers who's out there to make a name for themselves, and they just jump out and they harass constituents on a daily basis. And I just think that we need to have a more precise and clear platform on how, when constituents are trying to make a complaint, that they're not going to the police to police the police. That seems to never work. And I just think that we have to have another level of transparency here, that where we can hold those police officers accountable. So I would say at the moment, just continue to file those complaints with the police department, and And then hopefully, the police department, along with the state, that we can come up with a remedy to have a more fair and just platform to call out these officers who are breaking the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Anybody else wish to weigh in on that question? Okay, well, Ellie Becker is very happy to see this going on. Also said she was very proud this weekend with Norwalk police officers standing with the protesters in solidarity, and said that these are similar times, but different issues and times. What's the same is that when we raise our voices collectively and within the rule of law, we can and will make change. Let's see what else I can get here. We're getting a lot of questions on oversight. I think we've answered them and mentioned that when we come to the table, we have to have all issues on the table for discussion. Chief, what is the ratio of white policemen and women to that of those of color on the police department? Do you know that offhand? I know we have an aggressive recruitment program, and because we're an accredited agency, we have to have a recruitment in there designed to recruit a diverse workforce. Is that correct, Chief?
Yeah, our goal is to have a workforce that reflects the demographics of the city. That's our benchmark that we use, and we were pretty much right on. Like I said, up until about 2 years ago, and since then, we've had a number of retirements, which has skewed it a little bit. We're still very good, not as good as we were a year and a half ago or so, since we lost some officers that were longtime officers, 20, 30 years on the job. So we've been actively, in our last recruitment effort, trying to continue to recruit minority officers, and especially, like I said before, minority female officers. That's been very difficult. I don't know if it's just that they're not interested in the job, or given the current climate. I can't answer that question, but I think what I can say is that we're focused on that, and we do our best to try to hire so that we do maintain that diversity on the department.
Thank you, Chief. And I know that we always reach out to the faith-based clergy. I know Reverend Clark. I know we've reached out to Reverend Clark and the other ministers and clergy throughout the city. We're always looking to recruit a diverse workforce. We had probably the largest issue of the last test we gave for the fire department. And I know that the police department is also always looking to recruit a diverse workforce. So putting the word out there, we still have 80 participants and 89 questions. Anybody who wishes to be considered for a police position or a fire position, we're always looking for good firefighters, good police officers, and certainly I know Mr. Azima is looking for good teachers. So please, if you have people that are interested, please send them our way, because it's critically important that we have a workforce that represents our community in both in diversity and gender and every which way. I have a question here for our minority youth. Can we ensure Norwalk youth job training and job programs are part of a multiple year plan towards creating equality? The Mayor's Summer Youth Program is a great start that could be expanded. Yes, thank you. And I know in partnership with the NAACP and others, we have done job training programs. We want to continue those, not only for young people, but for older people who may be unemployed and not employable for whatever reason. We're looking for putting them into some of the trades, carpentry, masonry, plumbing, electricity, electrical contractors, those kinds of things. So we're always trying to do that, but yes, we do need to do more. And how do you tap into corporate funding to fund racial injustice work like the $1 billion that Bank of America just announced? well, we have to explore whatever possibilities are exist. We have to keep our fingers on the pulse of what those major corporations are doing. I don't know, Senator Duff, did you want to ask or kind of look at that as well, and what your thoughts are on that?
I think a lot of it comes down to relationships and, working with local community partners. I think a lot of times banks and other nonprofits will be happy to support concepts, providing there's a plan and there's community buy-in. So this is why I think, this is important to do. And as you said, Mayor, it's the beginning, not an end. And that if anything's going to come out of tonight with, the esteemed panel that's here and everybody who's been watching and listening, is that, a specific way forward or, proposals or plans that the community can get around, I think will be very, very important to funders in the nonprofit world and the for-profit world. And you can do public-private partnerships on those kinds of things that I think can have a real difference. So I think everybody coming together and working in the city's best interest and having real concrete plans will make a difference in how we can obtain any of that funding that might be out there.
Thank you, Senator. A question from Mary. I think you've answered this, Chief, and you can just touch on it again in case somebody missed it. At what point in an interaction with the public is a police officer's body camera turned on?
All right, they should be turning it on as soon as they get, well, with an interaction, it would be, if it's a police-related law enforcement interaction, if they're just talking to somebody, no, they wouldn't turn it on. If it's a law enforcement interaction, they should be turning it on. And if they get a call for service, they should be turning it on as soon as they get the call for service while they're driving, to the incident.
This question could be for Representative Sims and or Senator Duff. How can we address the segregation and Mr. Azima and perhaps even Brenda Pinn-Williams? How can we address the segregation in Norwalk schools that Senator Murphy referred to? I'm not sure he was talking about Norwalk schools. I think he said nationwide. It's 80% now or something, but it's a question that's out there.
Coming from the position of equity, really being mindful that as a school board, our decisions are made with as much context about our schools, the demographic makeup, the current needs and emerging needs of our students. A concrete start to assure that working from an evidence-based perspective, really utilizing and moving forward some of the disproportionality work that Dr. Strader is planning to lead. And it's critical, and it's a skill and training that we are going to be engaging the school district in and really embodying and putting this in our daily practice.
Well,
thank you.
This is what I want to say. Superintendents across the country have spoken out to support the minorities in their district. We have a problem in the Norwalk Public Schools. Dr. Adamowski publicly stated that there are more Blacks in the Norwalk Public Schools administration. Excuse me.
We can come back to Brenda. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
He stated there are more Blacks in the Norwalk Public School administration than in any other district. He systematically took out Black administrators and replaced them with whites. We've addressed the racist word of a board member, Mike Barbas, who refused to resign and still remains making decisions for minority students. So I don't know, there's some way that we're gonna have to really work to try to get people who appears to be racist. He said he wasn't, but he was using racist tones, we're gonna have to get them out of our system. And I'm not trying to pick on the Norwalk Public Schools, I am not, but I do see that it is a racist school system. I see that with the person that is currently leading them. And then they had the N-word was on a computer keyboard along with a swastika on a chair at Brian McMahon. Principal Hurwitz waited 1 month before reporting this incident. And how it got reported, there was a young girl at a Connect meeting who started talking about it. So they hurried up and they started trying to do something about it. You know, the district and the principal only wanted to call the Anti-Defamation League instead of the NAACP. The NAACP also represents all colors. Not only are Black lives threatened on the street, they are threatened educationally. And I really would like to see that change. I really would like for that to be changed. This has been the facts in slavery, and we are going backwards. It is time for a change now. We have Dr. Allen, who was an excellent principal. She was removed from her duties. We had Dr. Moore, another great principal. She was removed from her duty. We had Bruce Morris. He was removed from his duties. So, and all of these people that are good people, African Americans, they were removed and replaced by their white counterparts. That's not right. That's just not right. So if, you know, if it smells like racism, it must be racism. That's all I'm saying. And here's the thing too. They have been attacked. We have Al Saki over at Nathan Hale. He was the whole year, he went through hell. He was forced out. So what he did, he found a new job. Now he's gone. So I see that all the Black administrators and NPS, they have been targets. You know, it's good to say we have all these Black administrators, but then you want to keep them. You don't want to harass them. If they have a problem, then you need to bring someone in to help them out, to train them. Don't get rid of them. We need to see people like us so we can succeed. We don't need, every time we look, a face like this man. Who killed this man? He looking up, it's a white man on his neck. That's not right. That's not right. So we need to, and it's just like they felt like Adamowski was on their neck. He got rid of all of them, and it's not right. We're gonna have to start looking at folks and giving, again, there's that other word, respect. And if they have a problem, you don't like it, and it's these people that raise their hand. If they have a problem, they let you know. And then it's a problem for the superintendent and he wants to get rid of you. But we got to stop all of that. And Harry, I thank you for bringing this out because now I'm getting very passionate about this. Again, I speak up for the minorities and any other person that want me to help them, I will help them. But it's the minorities that are in the majority and they need more help than anybody because they're just pushed aside and folks just do what they want to do with them. So I rest my case.
All right, thank you, Ms. Penn-Williams. Just
If I could-
Babs Folder wants to know, Greg, is the police officer you referred to Donnie Sellers?
I know Donnie, but unfortunately not. This the police. I was born and raised in New York City, and actually the police officer that I was referring to had the same first name as mine, Gregory Foster, and those that know New York City history might have known the story of Foster and Loring. These were two officers, beat cops that really patrolled the streets and made a difference in protecting people and making it safe for everyone. And unfortunately, these two policemen were ambushed and killed. And Greg Foster lived across the street from me and was one of my mentors as a young man growing up in New York City. And I can say one of the visions that I have, I've never seen a funeral with so many cars in my entire life. And that was a tribute to Greg Foster, a great policeman.
Thank you. Mr. Azima, I think you had your hand up. Yep, Mr. Azima.
Sorry, yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. What I want to say, I definitely appreciate for sure Brenda's passion, and just want to acknowledge that the response to race or instances of racism when they've manifested isn't on one person to own it, and I just want to be clear that I look forward to engaging with you and really soliciting the community and just respond to this together. Because I don't believe, race-related issues that take place in the school setting are isolated to school. I want to acknowledge and appreciate the manifestation of things that are happening in our community that are just projected in different avenues. And I just want to make sure that I was clear and put out publicly that I'm excited to engage in this work with you and enlist the community responding to some of the things of grave concern.
Okay, thank you. The next question, Senator Duff, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, just thank you, Mayor. Just real quick on the last question on segregation. So much of this, I believe, comes down to housing policy. We have a segregated housing policy across the state of Connecticut and probably across the nation as well. And, in Connecticut, it's upon the cities basically to provide affordable housing. And that many of the communities in the circles around that circle the urban areas do not provide a lot of affordable housing. And in fact, there are some folks who are protesting the what happened with George Floyd, and yet they are opposing affordable housing in their communities. You can't have it both ways. And so you have to be mindful of the fact that if you're going to really be for a cause of equality, and you're going to really stand for excellence in education and opportunities for all, and have a school system that looks like our communities, our state, and our nation, then we have to be committed to the things that are difficult. Some of those things that are difficult are housing and a diverse stock of housing, which includes affordable housing. And so we have to all be committed to doing that. And you can't do that in, people will say, well, we don't have any property. Well, you can't do that in communities. Exclusionary housing is in places sometimes where you have 3-acre zones. That's designed to keep people out, or 2-acre zones. So we have to have those hard conversations about how we're going to propel more affordable housing, a more diverse housing stock for all of our people in every part of our communities across the state of Connecticut.
Thank you, Senator Duff. I'm not sure, Mr. Sims, did you have your hand up or?
I didn't have my hand up for this question.
All right, it's 9:30. Certainly 2.5 hours is not a long time to be dedicating to such an important topic. I have 2 more questions that I can, anybody can answer. I know the chief will probably start off, and then we will download all the questions that have not been answered, and we will put them on our website for tomorrow or within the next couple of days to make sure that people whose questions did not get answered live will get answered. So Chief, here's, and I think this is a good way to end. Chief, when you're pulled over, what steps should one make in order to be respectful and respected? And then the second part of the question would go, has anyone on this panel been racially profiled, and what tactics were used to let your voice be heard to stop the situation from escalating? So Chief, you want to start off with the first part?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, basic information. Number one, be cooperative, be pleasant with the officer, even if you don't agree with them. That's not the time to debate. And just make sure, just like the officer, he's approaching or she's approaching the vehicle, they have concerns. They don't know who's in the car. So you want to make them feel comfortable. And I'm hoping that the officer would try to make the driver feel comfortable as well. It goes both ways. But I think it's important that both sides understand that it could be a tense situation. It's an unknown. And the individual, should do whatever they can to put the officer at ease as well. And like I said, hopefully the officer is doing the same to the driver.
Okay, the second part is anybody that believes they've been racially profiled or that has been racially profiled, and what do you think, what did you do to de-escalate the situation, or how did the officer respond?
I'll answer that one, Mr. Mayor. I was pulled over one time and was asked why I was actually in the actual neighborhood I was in. And it was stated to me that I would need to get out the vehicle. You need to get searched. At the time, I was coming from law school just on vacation to come home. So I voiced my actual voice with, law, of course. I spoke with the officer. I explained to him Terry stop and frisks allows the officer to detain someone, probable cause, whatever the case may be. And the officer, respected that I actually, was coming from law school, but in the same sense, we had a conversation and we moved forward in that. But, the fact of being pulled over and, understanding what I was pulled over for and why I was where I was not adding up. But definitely, that was one thing that came to my mind.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. I guess the last thing, and I'll just say this to answer this question to kind of bring us full circle. Tanya Small, what is going to be different this time around in terms of reform? We have heard politicians and those in power say we are going to make things better. So what is going to be different this time? What needs to be different this time is commitment and follow through. I mentioned earlier that I've been involved in too many situations as police chief where something happened. And we all sit down, we respond, we sit down and we talk, and it was a feel-good meeting. And we walked away from the meeting and nothing happened. That cannot be the case any longer. I think I get a feeling that this is different. Somehow this frustration that's welling up in the population across all spectrums, it's different. And we need to pay attention to that. The people on this panel are, for the most part, elected and paid by the people in our community. And their voices need to be heard. That's why they elect us. That's why they pay us. That's why we're here to do the job. And so this is not a feel-good meeting. This is not the end. This is just the beginning. And we have to make that commitment. Tomorrow, I will be in discussions with my staff, and I will start a process in place. I want people in the community to be involved. I want people on this panel to be involved. It's going to take a lot of good, hardworking, dedicated people to implement the change that we need to make. It's not an easy task, believe me. And nobody's suggesting it's going to be easy. And as I mentioned, it's not going to happen overnight. But again, we have to get this moving, and we have to do it now. I saw a poster the other day, and it resonated with me. It said, "I understand that I don't understand, but I stand with you." And I've said that oftentimes, that I don't know what it feels like to walk into a store and be followed around simply because of the color of my skin. And we've got to stop that from happening. We've got to stop this systemic racism that exists throughout the entire country. So I want to thank this panel. Again, thank you. We still have 70 participants. I think that shows just how important this issue is. And we will continue. You have my commitment on that. And as before I close, I just want to offer anybody on the panel who wishes to say anything else.
I do. I'm sorry to monopolize your town hall, but I do. I have a quote here from President Obama, and it says, "This shouldn't be normal in 2020 America. It can't be normal. If we want our children to grow up in a nation that lives up to its highest ideas, we can and must be better." So here's what I'm saying. Nothing will change in our community for all children until people who understand racism and bigotry are in the places of power. If a significant change occurs, all children have a chance for a better and peaceful life. A change is coming. A change is coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Penn Williams. Mr. Roberts.
I just want to echo what you said. This is a wonderful way to at a start. And I told the chief this other day at the actual protest as well. And I'm going to say it again. Chief, you don't see too many police chiefmen out here doing this right here. And I really, really applaud you on that as well. Because, you know, especially at a time like this, everybody wants to be in the backside of things. And I applaud you for being out here as well, doing this. And for everybody on the panel, this is amazing. Our voices are loud and they're heard. And to everybody in here, I don't know if you guys look, but it was like 200 people in here. And this is big. So I honestly think that, you know, on our side, they got to hold, you know, to the community. I want you guys to hold us accountable because we are your elected officials, teachers, and mayors and leaders. So I definitely appreciate the opportunity to be on this panel. It meant a lot today. And let's keep, you know, the ball rolling.
Thank you. Mr. Sims, I think you were about to say something. Maybe I saw the lighter on your square come on. Okay. Anybody else wish to have a statement or closing statement?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Burnett.
I think the folks on this call would be the first to say that we are not perfect, but we're trying to get it perfect. We're trying to get it right, and we have a commitment to getting it right. And I think everyone that's on this call has a commitment also to service. If not, they wouldn't be in the role that they're in right now. And we want to make a difference. And most importantly, I think and you mentioned it, we have to get our youth involved. They're the future. They will bring about change. You know, the things that we put in place, we may not see come to fruition, but the youth will see it and they will benefit from it. So whatever seed that we can plant, they will see the growth of that work. So we have to keep the youth involved. And I think we're going to do that. And I think the commitment from those that are on this call and those that are not on this call that serve as community leaders, elected officials in the clergy, faith-based, that we all have a commitment for making our community a better place to live. And I'm proud of being part of that team.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burnett. Just kind of like what we talked about, getting the young people involved. The other day at the protest, there was a gentleman who was obviously an acknowledged leader. Mr. Roberts was kind enough to reach out to the young man and ask him to get in touch with me so we can sit down and have a conversation. Today, the young man texted me. I texted him back, and tomorrow we're going to have a conversation. And he's an individual that definitely needs to be a part of this process. But it's embracing everybody. It's not isolating anybody. It's not keeping anybody out of the process. Anybody who's still on as a participant, listening to all this, if you're interested in being involved in any way to help out, to try to work with us, please reach out to my office, reach out to me, reach out to anyone on this panel, because we need people who are dedicated, committed, and who understand what the problem is and who want to make it better. So if there's no other comments.
Mayor, Mr. Sims has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm just in with this that, yes, we have to address this systemic racial profiling issue that's been going on throughout the entire country. And for me, I think that, we when I served on the city council, we had discussions about implementing a civilian review board. And I think that still should be the direction that the city should actually go in, to make sure that, we have more transparency and more accountability to the residents here in Norwalk. And lastly, I would just say that, for future webinars, what have you, I just hope as the only African American legislative leader here that I would be included going forward. So thank you again, and it's a pleasure being part of this platform.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Again, thank you. My heartfelt thanks to the panel. Appreciate your time, and you'll be hearing more from us. Thank you.